Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And with the WWE draft in the books for the year 2023, everything on this channel, as you guys know, is all draft all the time. And this is sort of the final word on it. Let's talk winners and losers of this year's WWE draft. Let's start with the losers. What's your first loser, Larson?
First loser is going to be the brand that is NXT. Okay. So you got... I think I counted 18, but I could be slightly off.
I counted 16, but maybe you're right. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it was 16. Performers that were drafted from NXT in the main roster, a vast majority of those 16 to 18 prominently featured on television, including Grayson Waller, who has whole segments dedicated to just him.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You know, when he has the Grayson Waller Effect talk show, that's usually a good 10-minute segment that's just his. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of talent to be taken out of NXT. It's not to say they don't have the depth to make up for that, because they definitely do, but it's a situation where it's more, where from a creative standpoint, it felt like NXT was really hitting its stride. Mm-hmm. You know, week in and week out, it was some of the more enjoyable television that WWE was producing, and it was very reminiscent of what was going on in NXT UK in terms of focusing on character and how those characters clash. When you take that number of talents out, it's, you know, I think it's just natural. It's going to take them a little bit from a creative standpoint to get back maybe on that same stride, given that so many of them were drafted and called up.
The biggest, the most glaring one there is the women's tag division. I have no idea what they're going to do with those titles, because as of it stands right now, there are no tag teams in the women's division in NXT, none whatsoever. Conversely, I have my one of my winners, just because we're on the topic, is the stars of NXT, because so many of them were drafted. A bunch of them went up. I think with the exception of the women's tag title scene, they'll be fine reloading because they already have so much depth there. But a lot of people were drafted up. A couple of them really weren't featured on TV all that much. So it's great to see like Zion Quinn go up. Odyssey Jones wasn't really on TV much. So kind of interesting how that panned out. A big NXT presence this year in the draft.
Yes,
they are my number
massive.
2 for the winners. The people of NXT that got to get drafted, because there were 16 of them.
Yes.
My first loser, my bottom loser, is Baron Corbin. He's probably the most prominent person to get drafted to the free agent brand, besides like Omos. Omos, I think, has been drafted to free agent brand because he's an attraction. Otherwise, Baron Corbin, a guy who has all the potential in the world, who has always been short shrifted by creative. Like, I kind of expect Dolph Ziggler to be free agent brand. It's kind of whatever. You can put him anywhere, and he's
like a utility player at this juncture.
Right.
Yeah.
Same, I guess, with Mustafa Ali, if that's what they're expecting. But a guy like Baron Corbin really should be on a proper brand. And if his story continues to be, I'm just a loser who gets dumped on, that really doesn't spell very good, like much of a future for him, unless they focus on him, which they have not been doing at all lately. No. The days of bum-ass Corbin and happy Corbin are long gone. Seemingly, Triple H was not a fan of any of the characters of Baron Corbin, and that's why he hasn't been featured. That's the only thing I can think.
That could be. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, given, or once we're a couple weeks out from the draft, a couple weeks out from Backlash, once they have a really good idea of what the rosters are going to look like on Raw and SmackDown in practice, seeing who from the free agent brand, you know, gets signed to either Raw or SmackDown. It's going to be interesting to see how that happens and when it happens.
Quick side note also, when you said NXT as a loser, not only did I have the NXT kids as winners, but I also had HBK at my number 4, because sort of to go back to the NXT thing, because I just noticed that he's my next one. To get back to the NXT thing, for him to get his women's champion and his women's tag team champion swooped out from under him, that has to be pretty rough. But I think they'll just fast track Tiffany Stratton to getting that title. But yeah, if you're HBK, you assume that you're looped in because your best friend is running this, but it kind of feels like maybe not. Maybe he wasn't given a lot of time to prepare for this.
Yeah, seemingly. That seems to be the case. Next on my list for the draft losers, any of the teams or factions that seem like they could have been split up but weren't. I've mentioned Alpha Academy as an option. You mentioned Street Profits, Damage Control. They could have taken some interesting direction story-wise with splitting any of those teams, or even really Usos from the bloodline. That could have been some interesting story directions, and they neglected to split any teams for that matter.
Yeah.
And you got a team like Street Profits, who are great.
Yeah, of course.
Wildly popular, great team. And in a lot of respects, I'd be bummed out if they were to break up. But there has been some criticism of their creative in that it's kind of been doing the same thing since they've been called up years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if they're not going to introduce some new dynamic to them as a team, then maybe a split would benefit them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
But they chose not to do that. They chose not to split any of the teams. They didn't split Alpha Academy. Been interested to see what Chad Gable could do as a singles wrestler under Triple H. Same with Otis.
Yeah.
Splitting Damage Control. So you separate, whether it's you have Io and Dakota go to one brand, Bailey the other, or Bailey and Dakota and Io and the other brand, whatever the case may be. They just chose not to do it. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like in a lot of instances where they could have made some perhaps interesting creative choices, they kind of went the safe route instead.
Yeah, drafting factions together, absolutely. One name that I advocated for splitting a while ago was Dom Mysterio from the rest of Judgment Day. I think him swimming alone in the waters could have been kind of interesting.
Yeah,
I don't think it would have been a smart move, but I think it could have been an interesting move.
Yeah,
he does so well with them right now, and I think being with all those people, I think that benefits Dom obviously to a great degree. So you don't want to have him split off, but from a storyline perspective, it could have been interesting to see him just swimming alone by himself. I'll go to my next loser. It's actually two people. It's KARRION KROSS and Bronson Reed. Two people who were in feuds with names much bigger than theirs, who really could have raised their stock, especially in Kross's case, when his main thesis was, I change people when I feud with them. I get the sort of moral victory, if you will, with his own twisted morals. And him losing out on a proper feud with Shinsuke Nakamura, of course, is Friday on SmackDown. They're going to have their what seems to be their blow-off match, and Shinsuke's already moved on to The Miz, seemingly. It's a real shame that they're not going to have the showcase against those bigger opponents, those bigger name opponents, to really try to make an impact, because they've both kind of been floundering a little bit at this point. Now they're going to have to start over from scratch with a new feud on their respective brands without the opponent that they were facing off against. So KARRION KROSS and Bronson Reed, hopefully they can find their footing again.
Yeah. Hope so. Next, I have Asuka and Bayley, kind of for the same reason. They're both on SmackDown, where Bianca is going to be the champion. They've both feuded with Bianca. They've both lost. So there's the unless there's an introduction of a women's mid-card title. I mean, what chances are either of them having a sort of title run on SmackDown so long as Bianca is champ?
Yeah, none. I mean, I guess Bayley and Dakota Kai, if they somehow stay together as a tag team like we saw on Raw, they might have a chance at the tag team gold. But even that division is getting pretty stacked right now.
It is, and you expect that Ronda and Shayna are going to be first in line for winning the titles, actually, once Ronda gets healthy. Yeah, I
agree. Asuka is my number 2, but pairing her with Bayley is a good move also. My number 1 loser is SmackDown, because Raw cleaned up. I think SmackDown's still going to be an entertaining show. There's still a lot of really good pieces there, and of course the Bloodline's there. But oh my God, when you look at the actual breakdown of what Raw got versus SmackDown, it's kind of nuts. It's pretty obscene just how lopsided the draft was. My number 1 loser is the SmackDown brand, because oh my God, they got massacred this time out.
I got 2 more losers left here. First, Von Wagner. I said it in our overrun the other day that the history of NXT call-ups who don't have an established character hasn't been good.
Yeah.
And he is basically bereft of a character at this point.
He is, yeah.
He's imposing presence. He's a decent wrestler, but there's really nothing for viewers to latch on to connect with him. And without that, I mean, his outlook is heater for somebody. And then maybe if he smashed up with the right person, then he could develop a character. But right now, it's just like, what is he as a character? That was his story in NXT. His own manager, who he was.
Yeah, they had a real meta thing going there. You know what you do with Von Wagner? You just copy paste the Wardlow story, put him with an asshole heel, and have Von Wagner be the guy who gets, chumped around a lot until he breaks, he snaps, and he turns on the guy that sort of, owns his contract. You just copy and paste Wardlow and see if that works.
The thing is, Wardlow has charisma.
there's nothing you look, man. Look, here's the thing. Von Wagner, to this degree or to this point, really hasn't shown us that. He's going to have to if he's going to go anywhere.
I know.
So, all you can come up with is maybe stories to bring that out of him.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see if it happens. I got one more loser, and that's Austin Theory. So going to SmackDown, assuming he retains the U.S. title at Backlash, he's going to be more or less the week-to-week top champ on SmackDown. That's going to be even brighter spotlight on him than what was on Raw. And he's going to have to really step up and give us a reason to care about his character. So far, that hasn't happened.
Nope.
He can't just be a guy who beat John Cena. Yeah. That's not a character. That's an accomplishment. Give us a reason to care whether you win or lose. Give us a reason to care about the outcome of your matches. Give the fans a reason to respond to your presence, which hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's on SmackDown, he's expected on a week-to-week basis to more or less be the champion to help carry that show. With what he's been doing of late, it's just not enough.
I will say this. Sometimes it takes one good story to turn it completely around. Look at Dom Mysterio and what his story did. And look at even John Cena, who found one good gimmick, and he rode that to where he is today. It's a matter of cracking it. That's not always an easy thing to do. Mm-hmm. If they're able to figure it out, I think Austin Theory has what it takes. But, yeah, that's a big spotlight on him. You're right.
It is. And even if he loses the U.S. title to Lashley, then where is he on SmackDown? At least if he'd stayed on Raw, you're like, okay, maybe they'll revisit the Way storyline. Not necessarily that he rejoins, but it felt like there's story left to tell there, that brief little feud he had with Gargano when Gargano came back.
Yeah.
At least there was that, especially with Indy there. Mm-hmm. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen with Austin Theory?
Yeah. Let's move on to the winners. My first winner is the OC, the return of AJ Styles. If you look at how much depth there is on Raw with, who do they have? Drew, Shinsuke, Rollins, Cody, Gunther, Riddle, Finn. The list goes on.
Yeah.
If you look at all those names, AJ Styles over there on SmackDown, and there are a couple names over there that he can have a lot of really good feuds with, but it's not so super loaded. And of course, the top title is there, Roman Reigns. It's inevitable that we get AJ Styles versus Roman Reigns, the OC versus the Bloodline. SmackDown is the house that AJ Styles built. He's back, and he's healthy now. And so, and it's good for everybody in the OC. The Good Brothers, apparently had it in their contract. They didn't even have to be at TV if they weren't going to be used. Well, they're going to get used a lot now. They're going to get all that TV exposure. Mi Chin has been showing up basically as a depth guy. Now she's probably going to be pushed at least a little bit as a member of the OC. So it's good for everybody there.
Yeah. You mentioned AJ, you mentioned Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is on my list of winners. He more or less exhausted most of his opponents for the year, being on SmackDown. So there's been a lot of turnover. There's been enough turnover in the main event scene, as enough people remaining, that you have a good amount of fresh matchups over the next year. So you got Sheamus, Rey Mysterio, KRRION, KROSS, all staying on SmackDown that could be potential opponents for Roman during the course of the year. Plus, you bring in AJ, Bobby Lashley, and to a lesser extent, Austin Theory coming over to SmackDown in the draft. That's what, 1, 2, 3, 6 opponents, that could last him in theory the next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he's got fresh feuds. Hopefully keep the bloodline story from growing stale. And especially when it comes to feuding with Lashley, and I don't really have my hopes up this is going to happen, but if Lashley feuds with Roman and Lashley reforms Hurt Business, because you got Cedric, Shelton, they're free agents. Amos, free agent. MVP, free agent. So even though Lashley would come out the losing end of the Roman Reigns feud, he would come out of that story with the reformed, reunited Hurt Business, and that would be awesome.
I just realized that. They're so uncertain about what to do with the Hurt Business, they just put the rest of the Hurt Business in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. You spoke about Bobby Lashley. He's my number 4 winner. Again, I sort of said this with AJ, but, look at that men's singles scene on Raw. Everybody fighting for the Intercontinental Championship, which, by the way, ain't leaving Gunther anytime soon. Everybody trying to get after that World Heavyweight Championship, which Seth Rollins will probably get his hands on and not let go of. Everybody else is going to be fighting for scraps. Bobby Lashley's over there on SmackDown. You can't tell me he's not going to be the United States champion, the fighting United States champion for quite a while. And Bobby Lashley's the kind of guy who he can get the U.S. title, lose the U.S. title, get it back, lose it again, and he's not touched. he's always going to be that dominant personality that you can anchor your SmackDown show with as the top title guy when the top title guy isn't going to be around, which is probably going to be likely with Roman Reigns and his lighter schedule. So Bobby Lashley definitely came out as a huge winner.
Yeah.
He's actually should be my number one, but he's on my list of 5 for winners.
Yeah, definitely. Lashley, huge winner. Next on my list of winners, I got all the tag teams over on Raw. The Raw tag division is pretty stacked.
It's loaded.
It's pretty loaded. And you would expect with Owens and Zayn, their home brand being Raw, that the Raw tag teams would get first crack.
Yeah, right.
At challenging Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I mean, that's of course unless they split the tag titles, which could happen.
Yeah,
could happen as soon as the Raw after Backlash, maybe. But in the event that doesn't, you got a lot of really good teams over on Raw. Ricochet and Braun Strowman got drafted over there. Vinci and Kaiser got drafted over there. Indus is over there. You still got, if Judgment Day wants to pursue tag team gold, the New Day got drafted over there. Viking Raiders got drafted to Raw. That Raw tag division is pretty loaded.
With the Usos, the Street Profits over on SmackDown, and probably a bunch more that I'm not even talking about, the OC as well. They have to split those tag titles or invent a new one, right? They'd have to do that at some point. I mean, they did it early this year. They had number one contenders and matches for the separate titles. So I wonder if they're going to do that again. It seems like they're pretty fluid with that.
Yeah.
My next winner is the women's tag division with Alba and Isla, Carter and Chance, and of course Ronda and Shayna being drafted as a team. All of a sudden, the women's tag division, also Bayley and Dakota Kai picking up maybe as a tag team. Seemingly coming out of this draft, the women's tag division is a real thing. What Sasha Banks and Naomi were advocating for and left the company because of, it's come to fruition. It is an actual thing. They had a whole celebration for Raquel and Liv Morgan. It seems like the women's tag division, after all this time, finally is coming into its own as a real division that those titles will be coveted by a bunch of different teams, not just thrown together singles wrestlers who try, fail, and then split up again. That's great for the women's tag division, and it's even more confidence in that division now post-draft.
Definitely. Agreed. Next on my list of winners, I got the Brawling Brutes. I know Sheamus was going after the Intercontinental titles, one title he's never won. That being said, now that Gunther's going over to Raw, Sheamus can't worry about the Intercontinental title anymore. He could focus on WWE and Universal titles that Roman Reigns has on his shoulders. That's a feud that we haven't seen since we've gotten Bloodline Roman, and there's a lot of history between Sheamus and Roman Reigns.
Yeah, man. Sheamus is the guy that cashed in on Roman Reigns.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that they can reference. It seems like there's a good opportunity for some good stories being told. You got Sheamus with Ridge and Pete Dunne going up against, assuming the Usos are still in the bloodline by the time they do this feud, if they do this feud. Some awesome bouts. I think it'd be great. Sheamus versus Roman feud over the summer. Sign me up.
No, absolutely. My next winner, I already mentioned, is the kids from NXT. All those call-ups, 16, 17, 15, whatever it was, 18, who knows.
It's a lot.
But it's a lot of call-ups. Awesome for them. So I'll just skip ahead to my number one winner. That's Monday Night Raw, baby. Oh, my God. It is loaded. They have got everything and everybody over there. And it's going to be it's going to be great to see, man. There were 2 acts on Raw that really sort of dragged it down for me, and that was Austin Theory and Miz. Well, 50% of them is gone. They're on Austin Theory's on SmackDown now. More efficient show, less Austin Theory talking, maybe more Austin Theory character development. We saw Miz TV this week with Miz, but he's going to be in a feud with Shinsuke Nakamura, which should help the Miz be a little bit more interesting. At least that should be the goal. And so, Raw made out. They killed it. They absolutely, I don't know why. I still don't know what the I understand that it's an hour longer, but they got like 80% more people than SmackDown did. It's kind of nuts. Raw is my number one winner.
One talent that didn't end up going to Raw, and that's L.A. Knight. He's a winner in my book, the megastar. So now that Gunther is off to Raw, no one's beating Gunther for that Intercontinental title anytime soon. No. And no one's beating Roman Reigns for the Undisputed title anytime soon.
Nope.
Austin Theory, though, someone could beat him.
Super beatable.
And if it's not Bobby Lashley, you got a talent like L.A. Knight who's getting super over with the crowd.
Big time, yeah.
That by the time summer rolls around, He's got a bunch of momentum behind him.
Yeah.
He's given an opportunity to put on some really good matches. Get him in a program with Austin Theory, who gets basically no reaction from the crowd.
Zero. And
LA Knight's your new U.S. champ.
Good Lord, could you imagine? Are we going to get Austin Theory with Cryface and an LA Knight promo? 2-for-1 special and then a billionaire finger trap? Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see it. I think that's a really good point. LA Knight could be the next United States champion. That's a good point. Yeah, especially if Ashley and AJ set their sights on the top titles. Yeah,
it's entirely possible. I got one more winner, and that's Rhea Ripley. The Raw Women's division is super deep.
Yeah.
Super deep. She's got a bunch of matchups that are going to be really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got her and you got Ronda, you got Shayna, you got Becky. There's a lot of really huge marquee matchups for Rhea on Raw. That I don't know why, but for no reason, like the SmackDown Women's division just isn't, the depth just isn't as it isn't deep. There as it's just not as deep as opposed to Raw. Like Raw's got a lot of really good wrestlers over there,
and Raw retained or obtained like a bunch more. No, absolutely.
Yeah, so like here's some matchups for Rhea. You got Becky, you got let's see here, Raquel Rodriguez. You got Ronda, you got Shayna, Trish maybe,
Indy went
to
Raw.
Piper Niven, Nikki Cross,
Candice LeRae's there.
There's just a ton
Nikki Cross, I think, is still there.
Yeah, Zoe Stark. There's just a ton of really good matchups for Rhea Ripley over there. So
there's a lot they can do.
They can put her in feud after feud, put on awesome bouts.
Yeah. Number one winner right there.
Yep.
Anyways, let us know who your winners and losers are in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Do us a favor, hit that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Goodbye.